Welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. This video we're going to look at a pen that I've had in my collection for well over 20 years. Probably bought it on eBay based on what it is and when I bought it. But then I could have bought this also in a New York City pen store, which there were a number of them back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We can tell from the case that it is a Parker. Just your classic clamshell case. Interesting that it's made in Holland. But as we look at the pen, we might understand why that makes sense. So here we have the pen. We have strange sunlight coming in, so we're going to try to take advantage of the sunlight. So Wasky Squirrel did a review of the Parker Sonnet, so I decided that I would do a review on my Sonnet. And also, in honor of Penboy Roy, it's a really dark green. We'll try to get some of that to come out. You know, just a plastic insert in that finial at the cap. Very stylized arrow clip. The feathers are they're minimal. They're not as engraved as some of them can be. And we have identification on the large cap band. So it is definitely a Parker Sonnet, made in France. And as we see there is a 3E identification. So Parker, throughout their history, has branded pens with a date code. So to me, the 3E corresponds to the third quarter of 2001. So this pen was first made in 1993, and the E corresponds to a year with a 1 at the end. So obviously it couldn't be 91, so it must be 2001. Also, this is a later model Sonnet that has this larger cap band on it. And as we see, we're getting that color to come out a little bit better now. A standard pull-off cap, and we see a standard nib. Well, standard might be a little bit of a stretch, but it is a very nice nib. It's an 18 karat nib, 750, that's 75% in gold. We go over to the feed side and we'll see a designation of fine for, this is a fine nib. And we can see that tipping material on there. The nib's a little bit off center, but it doesn't interfere. The pen has been writing fine. As you can see, just a slight little push puts it back on center. Gold band at the bottom of the section. Just a comfortable pen to hold in the hand. Parker's been known for that. So this pen replaced the Model 75, which had been in production for a long time, and a good seller for Parker, so they came out with something a little bit different, and that was the Sonnet. If we uncap it, we'll see the classic Parker converter. It's branded. It works fine. This is a metal section with a plastic insert there that lets you grip on plastic. And it also makes for a very structurally sound design, something that Parker's been doing for a while. This tray comes out, and as we see inside, two pieces of literature. Get rid of the sun so we can focus now on the written material. This is your standard warranty card that you would send in. Obviously this pen was made to be sold in the United States. Interesting that it was sent to Denver, Colorado. And your classic registration, Parker probably gets you on some type of mailing list. In this date and time, it may have been snail mail. But Parker would like to understand a little bit about what customer bought this pen, and that way they could use their marketing to focus on that customer. I think this is an interesting booklet written in many, many, many languages. You had a 28-day nib return policy. So if you wanted another nib, and I'm not certain about all the nibs that were available for this pen. And it was warranted for manufacturing defects, which is common. If you flip it over, you'll see all the variances of this pen. It was made with two types of converters. This is the one we have, is the screw type. It also had the push-pull one, which is not a favorite of mine. Cartridges. And it also came in a rollerball, which as we get into the pen, I'll explain why I think that's important. It was also a ball pen, in which case it was designed to just twist the cap to extract it, and also a pencil. So that was interesting about this type of pen. And back in these days, they made the pens in many formats to appeal to a large audience. I mentioned you before about why I think the ballpoint, or sorry, yes, the Rollerball Point is a version. I had to cut the end of this converter off, and this is a Parker converter, because a normal converter wouldn't fit. And there is an insert inside of this barrel. Maybe the fountain pen version, this opening is open at the bottom of the barrel, and I could maybe push out that and put a regular converter in there. But when I first got this pen and no converter would fit, including aerometrics, I mean, they fit here, but they wouldn't fit inside the barrel. I went to Fountain Pen Hospital in New York. I went to a number of different places. I inquired. No one could really help me out, and no one could give me a converter that would fit. So when I was at the pen show, and Susan Worth was still with us, a sad loss to the community when she passed away last year, but she said, well, there's an insert there that was put in there when it was used as a roller ball. So that makes total sense, because you want the roller ball to be pressed up against the spring, and et cetera, et cetera. So mystery solved, but it still doesn't help me with my problem with this converter that I had to cut it off. And what happens is if you screw the piston all the way down, it'll come out of the threads here, and that's not really good. So you have to be careful when you fill with this, but it works otherwise okay. So this pen posts well, and also the cap seals well. This doesn't dry out at all. I think this is lacquer over brass, and as you can see, there's a very nice plastic cap liner in there that makes posting easy, and you're not going to scratch up that lacquer coating because of the soft plastic. If we take a look at the barrel, we can see that insert in there, which I think is designed for putting in a roller ball and not designed specifically for the fountain pen. So maybe this is some type of Franken pen. Who knows how it got to be in this state, but I have it now and I got it to work. I talk a lot about the 20s and 30s and being the golden age of fountain pens, about the variety of manufacturers and the quality of pens, but that was a different market back then, because fountain pens was the writing instrument and everybody needed one and wanted to have one. Fast forward to the 1990s and early 2000s, and fountain pens have now evolved into a luxury item. So I put together some pens from that time frame as reference points to the Sonnet. Here's a Le Mans from Waterman. Both of these are made in France. We have the remake of a Conway Stewart 58, and we have a duofold in the blue marble. So one of the things that a lot of these pens have in common, well, one of the things they all have in common is an 18-karat gold nib. So it's interesting that during this time frame that was fitted to a lot of the upscale pens. This one's actually a lever fill, but that's more an homage to a historical viewpoint. And this is when Conway Stewart, when their second or third reincarnation before the fourth one that's going on now. Well, the demise, and now Bespoke Pens are trying to rejuvenate the brand with what they can do. They all have converters except for obviously the Conway Stewart 58. They all have a very interesting color scheme. and they all cost upwards of over $200. So that's kind of the interesting thing to keep in mind when you're looking at pens from this era. As we continue to reuse my Fabriano pad that I use for my video review writing samples, the pen's a good length, will give you that dimension. Uncapped, it fits in the hand very well. This would fit in anybody's hand. This section is a little on the small side. It's like 9 to 10 millimeters, but it's long. You can grip it anywhere. A little flare out at the bottom. You definitely know when you're down at the bottom with that flare out and that little metal end. And the other thing, as I showed from the inside of the cap, it posts very, very securely. It's almost balanced better posted than unposted, so we're going to write with it this way. This really wasn't a skip. It was just hard to get the nib orientated with the paper right. I'm actually writing over the camera and looking in the viewfinder when I write. You can hear this nib gives you some feedback. The sound is actually a lot more than what you would expect and what you feel from using the pen. Like the other pens that I talked about in this era, this is a wet writer. I would call it smooth. It glides across the paper. It requires some pressure to write, which again I think is the nature of what pen makers felt back in those days people wanted, and people were used to ballpoints and they put pressure on those to get them to write. So they put that same type of design into their fountain pens. So we've reached the end of this video. Hopefully it's been interesting and you got some new information. This is KWZ green number 4, I think. It's one of the KWZs that has a very strong odor. But it's a nice green, nice clean green, so that's nice. So thank you for watching. This is just a nice pen. All these Parkers were great ergonomically. The 61, the 75, they just go on and on. So, and this pen is still being sold now. You can find it on eBay. You can find it on Amazon. The eBay ones, you actually can get the 18 karat nibs for under $100, but you're not going to get the colored. I don't see many of the lacquer versions around. They seem to be more now in black or somewhat maybe of a chased sterling, which is actually nice, but the expense goes up quite a bit when you get into the more precious metal versions. So we've reached the end of this video. May you enjoy all of your pen experiences, explore this wonderful world that we have at our fingertips. Bye until the next time. Green ink is good.